Welcome to Career and Leadership Real Talk, the no-nonsense guide for ambitious managers who want to have more impact and progress their career. I'm Pamela Langan, a job search coach and expert CV writer specialising in helping frustrated professionals land the jobs and pay rises they know they deserve.
And I'm Jacqui, a leadership and mindset coach specialising in helping newly promoted and new to role leaders to avoid the dickhead trap and lead with confidence. Between us, we've helped hundreds of leaders and managers to find new roles, take ownership of their careers, and handle the challenges that job searches and leadership responsibility inevitably bring. And now we're joining forces to share with you what we know has worked for our clients.
Hello and welcome to this week's episode. This is the second one in our summer series on emotional intelligence essentials. And today we are talking about emotional self-regulation. So this is one, isn't it, that we know comes up for so many people. And I think this is honestly something that you need to keep working on. I don't think it's a learn all about it once and done scenario. I think as you move through your life, as you move through different situations, you need to keep working on this and you need to keep that level of self-awareness quite high to make sure that you are working on it appropriately. If we're thinking about emotional regulation or emotional self-regulation, how would you describe that?
This is a great question because I think it's something that I probably wouldn't have had a definition for back when I was employed. So I feel like emotional regulation is essentially a component of emotional intelligence whereby you have an ability as an individual to be able to appropriately manage your emotional responses in the moment. So that especially is important when you might be triggered, when you might be under pressure, when you might be anxious, when you might be frustrated. So it's particularly, I think, when there are negative emotions present, and it's not about like getting rid of all your emotion or not feeling or not experiencing anger, frustration, irritation. It's about being able to experience those, process those, move through those quickly so that the way you behave when you are experiencing those negative emotions is intentional and is right for the situation and the context rather than purely being driven by how you feel.
Yeah, because it's so easy, isn't it, when you feel in a certain way for that to really affect how you respond and how you react. And I think it's quite interesting. And I read something last week when we were thinking about doing this series, and it was saying that basically all emotions last about 20 seconds. So when you feel that emotion, supposedly, like it's there for about 20 seconds, but you can attach all kinds of different thoughts and feelings to that and extend those feelings on. And I think in the workplace, sometimes it's quite easy to do that, isn't it? Especially if it's a negative emotion and it makes you feel in a certain way, then you can attach certain thoughts and feelings around it. Things like you're not good enough and all of that kind of stuff. And it really does escalate. So I think it's quite an important one, isn't it, to be aware of and also know that it's okay to have all of the emotions and to feel all of the emotions, because I think as humans sometimes are like, we shouldn't feel angry, we shouldn't feel frustrated, oh, we should feel happy. And then, but do we feel happy? Are things making us happy? And it's constantly questioning the emotions rather than just feeling them, understanding them, moving through them. So I think sometimes we can make it quite difficult for ourselves.
And there is research as well around emotions that suggests that actually we create our emotions. So almost that it's not that we experience emotions and then we have thoughts and feelings around them. It's that we create our emotions because of the thoughts and the way that we then feel about those thoughts that we're having. So it's very much, I think, a kind of chicken and egg. And regardless of which way round it is, if you're in a management or leadership role, if you're wanting to progress in your career, if you're wanting to do well, it's so important to be able to understand and regulate and have the tools to be able to do that. And I think it's also the physiological aspect. So when we experience emotions, it's not just how other people experience us that changes, it's also our own physiology. So, you experience stress or tension, you can have a heart rate that goes up, you can have a dry mouth, you can have shallower breathing. So there's lots of different things that when you have the skills to emotionally self-regulate, you bring your physicality into a better state and you ensure that other people experience you in the way that you intend.
Yeah, and I think as well with those physiological aspects as well, I think sometimes you can have those feelings before you actually realize that emotion is a thing, before you realize you're in danger, for example. Like your subconscious brain is picking up on all of those cues and all of those different things. So as soon as something feels challenging, as soon as something feels, it could feel a whole range of different things, but your body tends to pick up on that before you realize what's going on. And I think just recognizing that as well, because I know I'll personally be in situations where my heart will start beating really quickly. And I'm thinking, well, what is going on? What is going on here? And then you kind of questioning, is this a positive moment? Is this a challenging moment? What is happening here? But I think the more you do it and the more you train yourself to recognize those responses, you can really train yourself to pick up on those things and respond and react accordingly and appropriately. And especially in the workplace, that can really help, especially from a credibility perspective. If you've been somebody that at times maybe can overreact in certain situations and you know that you do, by starting to recognize some of the signs and things that happen and the things that go on inside your body before that overreaction occurs, then you can start to get control of that, can't you? And people will see the difference in your behavior. They'll see the difference in your level of calmness, the way you approach things. And I do think that when you get a good handle on it and you do create that calm atmosphere within the workplace, people are drawn to that energy, aren't they?
Just hearing you describing that credibility piece, I just reflect back to the episode that we did on the trust equation. And one of the components of trust is that element of reliability, of how people experience you and whether there is that sense of, do they experience you in a consistent way from one day to the next, from one scenario to the next. And I think that is a crucial part of it. So you build more trust when you're able to maintain a consistent approach. But yeah, there's so many different aspects with it that just make such a difference when you have that capacity to regulate and to be intentional. Your decision making, when you are self-regulated, when you're in a good place, when you're feeling good, then you're making decisions that again come back to what's important rather than how do I feel. You're not rushing decisions, you're not making poor choices, you're not emotionally hijacked and considering some things that maybe shouldn't be considered or not considering things that should. Your kind of team picks up on your mood. So if you are leading and managing a team, and I talked last week about how that kind of seepage of my colleague recognizing that depending what I was asking for as a drink on the coffee round showed the degree of stress. And that's a small example. But when you set the tone as a leader, if you don't have that skill to be able to self-regulate, and people can walk on eggshells, they can hold information back from you because they're worried about how you're going to react or what impact or consequences that might have. So yeah, there's a whole huge range of reasons why it's just really crucial to be able to build this skill.
Yeah, and it's funny, isn't it? Like the impact that it can have on the team, because you just think of your own self and the way that you do things in isolation, and you don't always think about the impact on your team. And like you're saying there, like your team could tell how you were feeling based on the drink that you were ordering. And it's a really interesting one, isn't it? Because sometimes, especially where things feel quite chaotic in the workplace, I think you do have to take that step back and go, hold on, how much am I contributing to this chaos? Is this something that I am participating in? Is this something that I am contributing to? What is going on here? And then if it's not me, then who is? Who is within the team? And then is that a development point for them? But I do think it starts with that real awareness, doesn't it?
And I think, again, just picking up on what you were saying there, that puts me in mind of the type of scenario where, as a manager or a leader, if you feel overwhelmed, then you're not stopping that chaos from trickling down. You're potentially adding to it. You're not creating clarity for other people. If you feel really stressed and tense, then how you operate is going to be different. And one of the things that I've said so many times over the years to clients is you're not as good an actor as you think you are. If you are not properly, actually, genuinely regulating these emotions, if you're just trying to hide from them or cover what you're feeling, then absolutely that is having an impact on other people around you. And if you lead a team, then I think it's really a responsibility for you to build this skill and this kind of ability to be able to regulate and recognize what's going on, because performance and morale will absolutely be affected if you don't.
Yeah, and just as you're talking through there, I was just thinking about somebody that used to work for me, and he had a team underneath him, and he was constantly like at my desk, we've got an issue, there's something going wrong. And it was like every day there was drama, it was all of this excitement, and his team were getting carried along for the ride, and they were feeling his anxieties and his frustration and his excitement around certain things and the drama of it. And it just felt every day, it was like, what is he going to bring today? And what I realized is that he was really struggling with self-regulation. And he was, rather than sitting with it for a second and going, is this really an issue? What are the consequences? What is actually happening here? His first thought is, I need to get to Pam. I need to tell Pam, this is all blowing up. Right, team, you need to react, you need to do this. And so the team were all hyped up, and we had a really high level of absence in his team. People were off with stress and anxiety and all of this kind of stuff. And it was like, hold on a minute, let's just have a look at what you're doing and the pressure that you're putting on the team, and are you role modeling the right behaviors? And then I had to look at myself and go, am I role modeling the right behaviors? Because at this point in time, this has been going on for a few weeks now, and I am allowing you to bring all of this drama and all of this hype every day, and I'm watching you do it to your team. So I had to go, right, let's just take a pause. Let's see what's going on. And then what we started to do was each day when he came to me with an issue, it was like, okay. And I went into coaching mode, and we sat down and we talked it through. And then after a week or so, I was like, right, before you come to me with the issue, with the drama, before you share it with the team, I want you to map it out. I want you to check that it is actually as dramaful as we think it is and all of this stuff. And slowly he started to change his behavior, and he started to trust himself more. And what we realized is that actually there was some confidence issues that were going on underneath all of that for him. And he was worried about making decisions because in the past he'd been called out on the decisions he'd made. So it was like he just wanted to bring everything to me, because if he hands the decision over to me, that's fine. If he gets the team hyped up and all working on different things, then he's taking action. We're all being proactive. But actually, it was just causing loads of drama. So when we broke it down and looked at it, it did take a while. I'm not going to say it was something that we changed overnight, because it felt like it took longer than it did. But eventually, we got to the point where he started to regulate his own emotions. He started to trust himself, and we started to work together better. But I had to take some responsibility in that as well, because I was allowing him to do that. And he had to take responsibility for what he was doing for his team. And we had some really nice open conversations around it. And I think through that, we did build a lot of trust. And he actually became a really good manager. And he's gone on to be a really good manager in the roles that he's done since. So I do think sometimes you do need to be that person that goes, I'm going to take a stand and help you develop this because this is not working for anyone, but we need to get to the root of it.
Yeah, it's really interesting the range of different triggers that can bring this to the fore, isn't it? And I think you probably illustrated two there. So one is that when your boss was under scrutiny, then that caused a trigger for them to feel like, oh, almost panic stations. We need to get onto this. We need to do it quickly. Let's go, and not be calm and intentional. But also how being on the receiving end of that then initially created for you almost that same kind of triggering response of, oh, now I feel stressed. Now I feel that the pressure's on me. Now I've got to explain myself. I've got to be able to do this. So I think that there's so many different triggers, from those to feeling under pressure if somebody asks a question that you don't know the answer to like feedback is a really common one. People find, especially if feedback is not delivered well or is not positive or constructive, that can be a real trigger and really difficult not to be defensive or be upset about. So there's so many different kind of times and ways. When people are experiencing this, then let's get into some of the practicalities. It's already say you need to build the skill, but how? What's one thing that people can do to make a start if they're recognizing, yep, I maybe do not have my proudest moments when some of these curveballs hit or when I'm not at my best? How can people start to build that skill of self-regulation?
So I think the first thing is really important, and that is to pause. So we say use the pause technique, and we talk about this all the time, don't we, on the podcast? But I think from a self-regulation perspective, the pause technique is super, super important and super simple as well. So when something happens, take 6 seconds before responding. And it could simply be that you count your breaths, that you count to 6, that you focus on something, but you just buy yourself that 6 seconds of thinking time before you do anything. You just need to let your brain engage before you do anything.
And I think you need to know that 6 seconds like will feel like forever, but it's really not. And I would absolutely agree with you on counting breaths when you are taking a pause. So where we're talking here is really taking a pause in that moment. If you've had that negative feedback, for example, it's before you open your mouth and start talking, it is literally take 2 or 3 good deep breaths. And the reason for that is not only does it create the pause and stop you from just saying the first thing, but it also impacts your physiology. So when you take that pause and you take those breaths, and like I say, it only has to be a couple, maybe 3, what that does is just helps to physically regulate your nervous system, helps to let your body know that what has felt like an attack or a dangerous or stressful situation that your kind of caveman brain is tipping into, it gives your time for your logical brain to start to kick in and recognize that, okay, this is not the end of the world. It might not feel pleasant, but I can make a choice about how so it just creates that bridge between the trigger and a reaction and creates a response rather than a reaction.
Yeah. And I think that the next thing, once you've done that, once you've taken that pause, I think the next thing is naming that feeling, that emotion. And we say, name it, tame it. And I think that is quite a good point as well, because once you acknowledge what you're feeling, it does help with that self-regulation. So things like, I'm feeling defensive right now. Let me make sure that I understand your point. Like, it's absolutely fine to share how you're feeling. And I think sometimes people appreciate that rather than you being defensive, or rather than you like coming across like maybe you're taking offense or you're getting angry or frustrated, if you're like, hold on a minute, I'm feeling defensive. I need to understand where you're coming from with this. That can also help the other person then realize that maybe something they need to explain further, or they need to articulate their point better, because it's got to be two-way, hasn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it quite often does have that. If you have that acknowledgement of, I'm feeling this way, sometimes people be, oh, no, I didn't mean that. I meant this. And they may have communicated off the cuff or without prior thought or not seen how it's landed. But also for me, name it to tame it really comes in with the when I talk to clients about my monkeys, or if you've ever read the chimp paradox, being able to tame your inner chimp, naming it even to yourself of this is the feeling that I'm experiencing. The way I once heard it described at a conference was it's about having a feeling, not being had by a feeling. And when you name it to tame it, even if that is just yourself, and even if you don't acknowledge it externally, what that does is create some separation between what's happening in your brain, all of this emotional response to whatever the trigger was, gets separated from. It doesn't have to keep you in its grip. It's a thing that you're experiencing. And almost going back to what you were saying about the short-term nature of how long we experience emotions, but then our brain can keep us in it. When you create that separation by labeling it, that can really help to understand that, okay, this is something I'm experiencing temporarily. And if, again, coming back to the pause, if I breathe, it will pass, or I can then find out more about it. Just, yeah, helps your brain to click into gear, even if it's not an external acknowledgement.
Yeah, and I think once your brain has clicked into gear, then you are in the best place possible to reframe the situation. So that'll be the final thing, reframing that situation, because that's the best way that you're going to be able to self-regulate. And it's shifting from this is a disaster to actually this is quite challenging and we're going to figure it out. And I think once you can reframe it, that's when you can find the solutions. That's when your brain allows you to do the thinking that you need to do. Because I think when you're acting from that place of fear or place of feeling an emotion, sometimes you might be in fight or flight. Sometimes you might have your rose tinted glasses on. There's loads of things that are going to be going on as you're feeling those emotions in the moment. But once you've worked through that, and you can do it really quickly, it's not we need to go, right, now we need half an hour to self-regulate. Like, we're talking you can do this in less than 20 seconds, really, can't you, overall? But it is just that reframe that then helps you to then figure out what are the next steps.
And I talk so much with my first 90 days clients about this reframing, because that whole phase of going into a new role, understanding what's expected of you, understanding where to prioritize, and that's a whole emotional roller coaster in its own right for those first few months. So this is such a crucial skill when you're going into a new role, because we've talked before about the wall and getting to that point where you're wondering, did they make the right choice? Am I ever going to be able to build that relationship? That person seems really tricky. So yeah, being able to consider, rather than what's the worst case that my brain might have already gone to, how can I frame this in a way that is more helpful for my brain? And that's such a skill for life. Instead of I'm not up to the job, it's reframing that as I don't have these specific skills yet, so this challenge is what's going to help me gain them, is just a very different way. It's effectively self-talk. It's a very different way to talk to yourself about the things that you experience, but it has a very real positive effect on that calming the nervous system, being able to then move into that logical headspace.
Yeah, and I think that's what you need to do, isn't it? And that's what you need to focus on. It's moving into that logical headspace where you can have the clearer thoughts. And I think sometimes as well, if people are listening to this and thinking, there's been times when I have reacted or responded in ways that I'm not proud of. And, I have been in situations where I've thought, oh, maybe I should have just waited before I said that thing. What recovery strategies can people use or lean towards if they feel like, oh my goodness, now I've thought of it afterwards, that wasn't the best way to react?
I think there's probably two things with this. So one is, again, it's the internal external bit. So one I think is that external thing that sometimes you can own it with, if that's had an impact on somebody else, if you've had what wasn't your proudest moment, if you've lost your cool, if you have got upset, whatever it may be, acknowledge that to whoever else it's impacted, apologize if needed, and then moving on from there. But I think the bigger piece is the inner game, and it's that aspect of, so often people will then hold on to that. They'll feel embarrassed, they'll feel guilty, they'll feel uncomfortable about that. And then they'll start beating themselves up about it and staying in that overthinking of, oh my God, that's so awful that I did that. What do other people think of me? People really don't think that much about what you did in that one session. And their experience consistently of you over a prolonged period is always going to win out. And I can pretty much guarantee that whatever you're fearing as worst case scenario, because you haven't had your proudest moment, is more likely to impact your emotions and your performance than the impact on the relationship that's been had. So it's like you can't do anything about it. Acknowledge that it's happened, acknowledge it outwardly if needs be, but practice some self-compassion. Like, acknowledge that, okay, that's something I can learn from, move through it, and then away you go.
Yeah, and I think if you're listening and you're thinking, this is definitely an area that I'd like to do more work on, get in touch with us because we can talk you through some of the coaching options that we've got. Both of us are working with clients on all of these topics all of the time. If you want somebody to bounce some ideas off, or if you want to go through that whole coaching experience, then get in touch and we'll be able to tell you what options we've got available. And as ever, thank you for listening. And please do share this episode or this series, actually, the summer series, with anybody that you think might find it useful. And we would absolutely love to hear any feedback from you. And we'd also love to hear about any episodes you'd like us to do too. So get in touch and we will see you next week on our next episode.
Exciting news from us. If you're an ambitious leader or manager earning 50k or more and you're ready to take your career to the next level, we have an opportunity for you. Introducing Catalyst Career Club, your secret weapon for unlocking career success. As a member, you'll get access to monthly live training sessions, exclusive job opportunities, and the ability to get personalised advice from us on your toughest career challenges.
We've helped thousands of driven leaders like you secure significant pay rises, land dream roles, and thrive in their careers. And now we want to support you in achieving your most ambitious career goals too. Membership is just $6.99 per month with no contract or tie-in. And as a special bonus for being our podcast listeners, you can use the code podcast at checkout to get your first month for just £1. Head over to pamelalangan.com/Catalyst Career Club to sign up now, and we'll see you inside.